Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another installment of No Money Film School Commentary Tracks. Tonight's movie, Back to the Future, Part 2. We looked at Part 1 the other week, and so why don't we cover the other two while it's still fresh in our minds? And because I think the Back to the Future trilogy is one of the best film trilogies ever, especially because the filmmakers didn't necessarily plan on doing any more, and this was before the mentality that we're in now, where everything had to spawn a franchise and spawn spin-offs and that kind of stuff. They made this because the first one did well and because there was more to tell. Um, and they actually shot this film and part three back to back, which is still not overly common today, as much as you might think it would be. We had a few examples of that, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy was filmed back to back. Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3 were filmed back to back. And, some of the MCU films, because they're all shot in Atlanta, they will have a lot of overlapping cast and crew and that kind of stuff. But that's a whole different thing. But yeah, this film is definitely an interesting one to look at because it crosses multiple timelines. It starts in 1985, goes to what the filmmakers thought 2015 would be like, and then it goes to an alternate 1985, and then it goes back to 1955. So we have a lot of jumping around in this one. And we've got a flying DeLorean. We've got a lot of predictions about what they thought the future would be like, a good chunk of which actually turned out to be surprisingly accurate, and we will get into those. But I think the reason why I wanted to highlight this on top of the greatness of this trilogy is because it shows how you can honor the first one while also doing a lot of new stuff and setting the groundwork for the story's conclusion. And plus, in traditional three-act structure, especially with trilogies, generally the middle chapter is the darkest one, at least traditionally. That's not always the case, but oftentimes it is. In this one, the tone is still very fun-loving. It's still very, it's still got that classic Back to the Future lighthearted tone, but especially in the middle act, I think things, you see a lot of darkness and a lot of just how evil Biff really is as a villain, despite still being a comic villain. He shows the depths of his monstrosity underneath his bully facade. Or not facade, but it would be easy to dismiss him as just being a cartoon character. But anyway, so yeah, this film stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, and Thomas F. Wilson. And we have a few replacements. Crispin Glover did not return, and there's actually quite a lot of controversy surrounding his not returning. It was due to like a dispute with the producers over his pay, and so they recast his role, but they used a lot of heavy makeup to make the new actor look like him, and they kept him kind of in the background. There's a whole big thing about that. And Claudia Wells, who played Jennifer, does not return due to personal reasons, apparently, but it was the role was recast to Elizabeth Shue, who went on to great critical acclaim in movies like Leaving Las Vegas. This had a lot of pretty revolutionary visual effects. It had a lot of great predictions about what the future would be like, and it set the stage for a wild conclusion in part three. So we're gonna examine this film from the perspective of the overall filmmaking, but also how it works in terms of film trilogies and just some other fun things along the way. Now, this film was not overly well received when it came out, and I didn't end up seeing this one until I was a little older. In comparison to the first one, when I saw that one when I was little, but this one has definitely achieved much more of a following since it came out in 1989. And just on a personal note, the date when Marty and Doc and Jennifer, when they go to the future, it's actually my 24th birthday, October 21st, 2015. And sorry to say, despite having looked forward to that date for so many years, when that date finally occurred, it was pretty disappointing. I didn't have a big party like I thought I would, and it was pretty sad and lonely. But we are going to make up for that by taking you all on a journey to what the filmmakers thought 2015 would be like, and in some ways, what it was like. But enough of my yakking. What do you say we start this thing? So I'm going to give you the standard 3, 2, 1, go countdown, and we will push play on this thing. Now, just for reference, I am watching the 2020 4K restoration of the trilogy, and but you guys can obviously find it on whatever streaming platforms or iTunes or DVD or Blu-ray or whatever you have. But obviously I can't show the movie to you because of copyright, but you guys can play it from wherever you have it, and you can follow along with me. So, 3, 2, 1, play. Alright, so as we start up here, one of the things that they had to do was they decided to reshoot the ending of part 1 and put it in the beginning of part 2, and partially that's to reintroduce the audience to where we were in the story, because keep in mind that home video technology was still relatively new, and also because, well, it'd been 4 years and they had an actor replacement here, which you'll see Elizabeth Shue as Jennifer. And if you notice the ending scene of part 1 and the beginning of part 2 back to back, there are some changes with like the house and that kind of stuff, because I assumed that they couldn't get the same house back and that kind of stuff. But they did a pretty good job of recreating the overall look and feel of the ending of part 1. Now, because this is reshot, they tried to do it shot for shot perfect. There's a little bit of awkwardness and stiltedness in the performances, I think. A little bit of listlessness, and I assume that it's probably because they're trying to match what they did before, so they're not coming at it from the same kind of spirit and angle that they once were. So that's something to keep in mind if you ever, in your filmmaking efforts, if you're ever having to recreate something, just try to give it the same energy that you gave it before. However, one very important thing happens in this recreated version of that scene is once Marty says, what happens to us in the future? What do we become, assholes or something? A notable change is that Doc actually hesitates before he says, no, both you and Jennifer turn out fine. So in other words, in this case, he clearly knows more about the story than we necessarily know at this juncture. But that was a notable change from the first one. So it's like he knows more about Marty's history that he's not telling him until, just to not make sure that he doesn't, get disheartened or whatever. And of course, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88. Famous ending line from part 1. Except, in the spirit of this film, we see this same scene, but from a different person's perspective. There's Biff there. He ends up seeing the DeLorean take off and fly. Now, this is actually pretty critical for Doc's character, because he, at this point, because he didn't really get a chance to enjoy the time machine that he had spent so long building. And so in this one, you see that he, kind of gets carried away with what he had built. And so that's kind of a critical aspect of his character in this film, and how it will eventually lead into part 3, where he realizes that he's been irresponsible and his jumping around in time had caused a lot of problems. And some people have said that, his jumping around in time and changing the timeline made 2015 not show up exactly how it appeared in real life. And, we can say that if we want. But anyway, this does help to give Doc a little bit more to do beyond being kind of the crazy wide-eyed scientist, even though he still very much is that. But it shows that even a wise man like him can get carried away and kind of get drunk with power based on the wonder of his invention. Now we have our Through the Clouds sequence here, which is interesting. It's different from what we saw in the first one, where the first one just kind of started. It started, but we got a lot of key visual information there with like the plutonium and the fact that Doc hadn't been there in a few days and that kind of stuff. which gave us a lot of really critical key visual information, but it was not really a spectacular opening sequence in the way that we think of with a blockbuster. This one definitely captures that a little better, especially as we enter this movie's version of 2015 in the Skyway there. Um, and You gotta love the fact. I mean, my favorite thing about this film, and I suspect the favorite thing about this film for most people, is the fact that the DeLorean can fly. I always thought that was cool, and of course, there we are, the October 21st, 2015, which was then 30 years in the future. Well, from 1985, this came out in 89. Which poor Jennifer, she has to get Jennifer, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're in a time machine. Which, geez, that's a lot to lay on a person all at one time. I feel sorry for her. Now, I gave credit to Elizabeth Shue here. Like, I feel like she gives Jennifer a little bit more personality, and also because she gets a little bit more to do in this one. Um, Jennifer was just kind of there in the first one, so this one definitely gives her more to do. Not a whole lot, because as we see here, Doc has to like knock her out basically. Relax, Marty. It's a sleep-inducing alpha rhythm generator, and when she wakes up, she'll think it was all a dream. Which, what'd you bring her here for? Which not now. Okay, so one thing you'll have to accept about this film, if you're going to enjoy it, is that there is a lot of exposition and a lot of kind of technobabble, even more than the first one, because this film deals with alternate timelines. And you might say that that's a bit of a weakness in regard to the first one, which flowed so naturally. But again, this film is dealing in a possible future, and this one's dealing in alternate timelines and all these things that I think the average audience members wouldn't have necessarily been able to grasp at the time. So, at least for my money, I think it works pretty well, but it won't necessarily work well for everyone. I did notice when I watched this the last time that there was a noticeable clunkiness in comparison to the first one, but the first one was just so streamlined that it's hard to beat that. I did like the weather service thing. I thought that was funny. It is amusing, the fact that like conspiracy theorists today think that the weather's man-made, and they think that stuff is real, but it isn't. But it is in this one. Now, what are those laser discs in the garbage chute, or what are those things? Oh yeah, he went to a rejuvenation clinic, and basically the filmmakers just wanted to not have to keep applying the same makeup effects to Christopher Lloyd, I assume, and try to make him look a little bit closer to how he looked in 1955. Although I guess perhaps it's also kind of a joke, because he doesn't look overly different from how he did in 1955, just a slightly less wrinkly and that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's on a tight schedule, so it's hard to talk about this particular film because of just you keep wanting to look at it, and you say, oh, these things happen, or these things, like one of these things that did actually happen, but it happened because of this film, is the power laces on the shoes, and that sort of thing, which that's a little different than some of the other things. Now, let's see, so we got a small camera, that happened. We don't have the collapsible sleeves or any of that stuff. And they still have phone booths in here. It's not cell phones. But look, see the power laces? Those actually really happened, but they happened because of this film, specifically for the people who remembered it. And those became like a pretty highly sought after collector's item. They didn't become mainstream fashion. But yeah, unfortunately, we do not have the sleeves that adjust. We don't have the size adjusting clothes or anything like that. Nor does Doc's fashion. That doesn't match up with current trends. Although I kind of wish it would. Although the pants pockets inside out thing, I have not seen anybody do that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if that suddenly caught on. Now, I know that some pants pockets, they tend to be virtually non-existent. The Cafe 80s thing, that did happen, and it happened in Oh, I think those are laser discs. Those are laser discs and CDs, and those look like they're in garbage cubes. Now that did happen because obviously laser discs went the way of the dinosaur pretty quickly once DVD came out. And then also CDs, they're still around, but like physical media as a whole has been going into much more of a niche market, which is too bad. I'm watching this on a 4K disc, and I'm very proud to be a physical media guy. But that's actually something that they, I think that they realized that physical media might have been in danger at that point, or I don't know what. It could have been just a gag. I know that the filmmakers were not necessarily trying to make super duper accurate predictions about the future because they knew that that inevitably they would be wrong. But just the fact that they predicted as much as they did, I think, is pretty remarkable. Now, the abolishing all lawyers thing, that hasn't happened yet, thankfully, although we've certainly had our, controversies about like the Patriot Act and military tribunals and that kind of stuff, although it's nowhere near to this extent. But you see there, like you said, I've already gone further into time to see what else happens. So like he's jumped around a lot more than than we have known. And plus, he says that he says that this event starts a chain reaction that destroys your entire family. Which interesting that he pinpoints it to this incident, despite the fact that he's already kind of a loser. And in fact, the incident that really sets his family down a bad path is what we're going to see at the end of part 3, but we'll get there when we get there. Yeah, the Cafe 80s thing, they had no clue how accurate they would be on that one. More so because of barcades, which we actually will see Wild Gunman, the arcade machine, in the Cafe 80s. So yeah, they had no clue how accurate they were going to be on that one. Now, again, we don't have flying cars on mass production, although we have certainly seen plenty of tests and prototypes and stuff. We've seen that. Now, I like the fountain in the square here. I think that's a good touch. This does kind of look like a theme park kind of attraction, which obviously this movie, and even more so than the first one or even the third one, this one did provide much of the basis for Back to the Future, the ride, which was a very popular ride at Universal Theme Park for a long time, which, there's Texaco there. The Jaws 19 thing, the sequel they stopped at part 4, which had already happened in 1987, so we did not have Jaws 19, unfortunately, although the 3D thing, that was very much a trend in, the 2010s. So they got that part right. Now, Stark still looks fake. That's one of the best gags. I know that there was a fan project that was supposed to happen to where people were going to make fan sequels on like any budget level, no budget, all the budget, whatever. They were going to make a bunch of fan sequels from like 5 to 19 to make sure that Jaws 19 could happen. And I don't know what ever came from that. For all I know, it might have happened. Okay, we got a lot of Easter eggs here. We got a Jaws NES game. We got Roger Rabbit, stuffed animal. We got Perrier. We got obviously the Gray's Sports Almanac. We got a JVC camera there. We got Michael Jackson's "Beat It" playing, which this was before. Michael Jackson was obviously the biggest thing in the universe, but this was before licensing his music for popular media. That was before it would cost an arm and a leg. Like it does today. Same with like the Beatles. Now you see the virtual celebrities thing here, which now that's an homage to that's the stuttering. That's an homage to Max Headroom, which was popular in the 80s. But we have like a Ronald Reagan impersonator here. We've got Ayatollah Khomeini. We have obviously we saw Michael Jackson there. Now the kind of bringing back dead celebrities thing, they actually kind of got that pretty darn right as far as like deep fakes and obviously like the work that was done with Peter Cushing in Rogue One and that kind of stuff. So again, they got that part right. They didn't even know how right they would get that. But there's Wild Gunman in the background there. And yeah, there's old man Biff, who, man, is he a nasty son of a bitch. Now that Pepsi that he's got, whatever that is, Pepsi Perfect or whatever, that also came out as a promo item in celebration of this film, which is pretty cool. I do like his cane, though. I like the hand thing. That's pretty cool. As well as the fact that, yeah, Pepsi Perfect, there it is. Um, Plus, not talking about George McFly, I'm talking about his kid. Yeah. And there's Griff in the background. Now, there's a lot of the whole theme of this series is history repeats itself, which, they make that abundantly clear in this film in both the future and in the alternate 1985 and in 1955 again. Um, which I like seeing Thomas F. Wilkins, or Wilson, excuse me. I like seeing him play Griff. I think he does a great job in, well, all the various parts that he plays, all the various Tanner descendants and ancestors, because that's the thing that this series makes clear is that the Tanners have always been just the worst people imaginable. Now, we do not have the cybernetic implants thing yet, to the degree that they do here, but I'm sure we're on our way. We have a lot of, like, 3D printing of limbs and that kind of stuff, but that's not quite the same thing. Now, you will actually notice a very young Elijah Wood here. He's the kid in orange there. Yeah, that's young Elijah Wood, which is pretty cool. And yeah, there's the old Wild Gunman arcade game, which one of the best lines, "Oh, you have to use your hands? That's like a baby's toy," which this predicted the Kinect. That's pretty cool. But the fact that he has to use a gun and that kind of stuff, that actually is some subtle foreshadowing for part three, which will take place in the Old West. There's a couple of subtle bits of foreshadowing in this that predict what will, or foreshadow what will happen in part three, which I think is really smart. And that goes to show that it helps to know where your franchise is going, or where your timeline, your overall end goal is going, so that way you can plant the seeds for it. Which that's one advantage of the franchise model that we have now, especially like say with Marvel, where they know what the end game is. They even put it in the title of Avengers Endgame. So they know what it is, so they know what it's all building up to, and so that helps everything to match up, all the plot points to line up just the way that they need to. Now you'll notice you see Michael J. Fox in the frame, in two different places, and you see the camera move, and that's due to it's a system called VistaGlide motion control camera system. Allows an actor to portray multiple characters simultaneously on screen without sacrificing camera movement, which, that was pretty remarkable. And even looking at it today, it's still pretty remarkable. We've had, a lot of smaller indie films that, have been able to do just green screen splits if they have the same actor portraying two different characters or whatever. We've had that, but this is pretty advanced for its time. Now, there is some rudimentary CGI in this film, as we saw with, like, the flying cars and that kind of stuff. It's pretty rudimentary, but it holds up pretty well, all things considered. Well, it was light years ahead of its time. Oh, what's the matter, McFly, chicken? Now, they had to kind of introduce this particular plot point for Marty's character in this film. You saw a little bit of it in part one as far as like him being kind of overly emotional, but it was never quite this overt with that particular word as his like trigger word. But the fact that they do introduce it here, it helps to make the rest of his character arc in this film, and especially in part three, it helps it to make sense. We see a lot of the same gags from the first one repeated, except of course, there are a lot of things that don't quite match up the way that they did because he's got the cybernetic implants and everything. Oh yeah, besides the flying car, we have the other thing that everybody, including myself, remembers about this film, which is the hoverboard made by Mattel, which unfortunately we do not have, but yeah, hoverboard made by Mattel, and it's all pink and all that, which I want one of those. Although then again, I would rather have the power board that they have, the Griff and everybody has. But point being, we do not yet have a hoverboard for mass production, although we apparently, we do have some different like gliders and stuff that people have made that look and function more like the Green Goblin's glider than they do a hoverboard. But point being that we do have some things that are kind of like that, but certainly not for mass production yet. Um, and we do have hovercrafts and stuff, but again, they don't quite function the way that this does. Um, Not yet, anyway. But hopefully someday, because I want one. Who doesn't, really? Something very familiar about all this. It's, yep, history repeats itself. Or as George Lucas would say, again, it's like poetry. It's sort of, they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Maybe it'll work. Or hopefully it'll work. And yeah, we do the chase through the streets and all that stuff. But I think it's one of those things where, given the subject matter of this film, it's more forgivable that they're doing some of the same stuff because it is specifically about history repeating itself. And also, there's enough that's different about it to where it's not like they're trying to recreate the magic of the previous one. Because, like, obviously, the US boards don't work on water unless you got power. That whole thing, obviously, that's unique to this situation. Now, why Marty can't just get off and jump? You can't. I mean, sure, he'd get wet and everything, but why he can't just get off the board and just, because that's not exactly deep water. He could totally just, get off the board right there. I mean, I assume because he's kind of a, fish out of water in this whole thing, I assume maybe he doesn't think to do that. But even so, it's like he could totally just get off the board and, yeah, he'd get wet, but he would not be stuck. Of course, as we find out, maybe it wasn't so stupid after all. Maybe it was all part of the plan. Maybe it was to. I mean, I don't really know if it was part of the plan or if he just thought to do it as instinct or whatever. Let me see. Yeah, that looked more like it was accidental. I think he probably could have jumped off of it, but then again, the whole crux of the scene here is that him, breaking the window and all that stuff makes Griff go to jail instead of Marty's son, and that, of course, helps to, set the good bit of history in motion, or so we think. Buttheads. Perfect. Still the best insult of all time. But yeah, I think he totally could have jumped off that, because that looks like the shallowest bit of water. Which, yeah, it automatically dries, which we unfortunately do not have that, as convenient as that would be. But yeah, I think this film kind of shows how one can keep it. I got a pit bull now. That's a great line. I think that here's this guy who that bit of makeup, I have to say, is not really aged well. That looks like it's really fake hair, but then again, for all I know, maybe that was intentional. Maybe he's supposed to look artificial. Now, the Cubs win World Series thing, they were actually, interesting bit of trivia there. Apparently, I don't really keep up with sports very much, but I know that in the actual 2015 season, the Cubs qualified for the postseason, but they lost the National League Championship Series to the New York Mets. And they did end up winning the 2016 World Series against the Cleveland Indians. And the official Twitter feed said that Marty and Doc's time traveling caused a rift in the space-time continuum that led to the 1994 strike and subsequent cancellation of the 1994 World Series, thus delaying the accurate prediction by a year, which I think is pretty funny. And just like how Doc gets carried away with, time travel and that kind of stuff, Marty gets carried away with the idea of being able to make money on knowing what future events, what will take place in the future, which I'm really glad that they went there, because that would be a very tempting thing, because it's like, well, he and Marty, being a kid still, being a high school kid, he wants to be rich and everything. He wants to be a rock star and all that stuff, so he's thinking that, he's thinking he might be able to insure his wealth and that kind of thing, which is, again, that's a very believable emotion. Yeah, he just showed up. All hell broke loose. A sleep inducer. I was afraid of this. Oh, Jennifer, I wasn't enough power left to knock your son out for a full hour. which again, that's one of those things that we have to kind of be told rather than being shown. But nonetheless, it seems to do the job as we see the newspaper headline changes. Um, but yeah, I like the fact that again, both Doc and Marty are learning about responsibility and this thing. Oh, look at that news drone, which that they predicted that they predicted the camera thing, the small cameras that are totally digital. They predicted that too, and but yeah, I like the fact that both future history has now been altered, and this is the proof. I think that the fact that they both have to learn about responsibility, that's a really important thing. Um, and uh-oh. Oh, I like the zippers on his pants there. Those are actually pretty accurate. I think that I have had pants that looked like that a little bit. So they got that part right. I don't know if those were around in the 80s, but for sure I have had pants like that. Which again, Doc sounds a little bit like a hypocrite here because he's trying to go into the future for noble reasons, but in fact, his doing so ends up causing more problems. And Marty's is selfish to be sure, but it's also a little bit more straightforward. And just the fact that they're even having this conversation out in the open, where old Biff can hear them. I mean, that obviously proves to be their undoing. And I like that. That's a hell of a good facelift. I like the fact that we get to see their future home. The thumbprint thing, that also turned out to be true. Not so much for home security, but most certainly for one's smartphone. That turned out to be accurate as well. And this, of course, throws a kink in their plans. They have to go try to get her out of his future home. And now we get into the whole idea of a time paradox, which this is an interesting element to introduce into the thing. So he says, I foresee two possibilities. Coming face to face with herself 30 years older would put her into shock and she'd simply pass out. Or the encounter would create a time paradox, and the results of which could cause a chain reaction that would unravel the very fabric of the space-time continuum and destroy the entire universe. Granted, that's the worst case scenario. The destruction might, in fact, well, it might be limited to our own galaxy, which, that's a relief. That's a great line. I have the subtitles on just in case you can't tell, because it helps just let me know where I am in the story. But yeah, that's a very interesting element to introduce into this thing because obviously we have alternate timelines, we've got multiple timelines to juggle, and we have the idea of a time paradox, which those are all pretty heavy subjects to introduce into this thing, into this mainstream blockbuster. So you could understand why the normal movie-going public at the time, why they might not have been as keen on this thing at the time, because again, this was all pre-internet. Nowadays, with the internet and with the MCU kind of helping to warm people up to the idea of alternate timelines and, alternate universes, that kind of stuff, I think that helps to make it a little bit more palatable for the everyday person. And actually, in Avengers Endgame, if you'll recall, they actually reference Back to the Future and say that's not how it works, so that way they can kind of differentiate themselves. Tranks, Lobos, and Zip Heads, which I wonder if they mean Zip Heads hopefully they don't mean that in the racist sense, but who knows, maybe they do. I really can't tell. It's the future. Zip Heads could mean anything. You got a little trank, so that's what the filmmakers assume is like a modern day slang. So again, I'm sure that they're doing a little bit of guesstimation here. Now we're at some point on the street we're gonna see a remote control, like a dog walking drone, which I don't know if we have those for like mass production, but for sure drone technology became a thing at that time. Now the scenery channel there, not so much a whole channel, but for sure YouTube channels that were devoted to things like that, like relaxing scenery, and like there are whole YouTube channels that are made for relaxing your cat and that kind of stuff. So I mean, again, that was much more accurate than they necessarily believed. Now, see, Jennifer gets a lot more to do here, but again, I feel sorry for her. She didn't ask for all this shit to happen to her. She got, all this thrown at her all at once, and she's still all that she's thinking about is just getting down and dirty with Marty at the lake. Which, Mom, what was that? That kid looks like she's the same age as Elizabeth Shue, in my opinion, but I have nothing to confirm that. Oh, here we got our dear, what's her face, Leah Thompson back, and not Crispin Glover. So that's part of why they had him be upside down like that, to try and conceal that fact. Plus, it's just kind of a goofy image. I like the goofiness of the image. But yeah, we got Leah Thompson back. What she's able to do in this series, because she plays a couple different characters in part 2 and 3. Well, she plays Marty's mom old. She plays her in the alternate timeline when she's very, full and robust, shall we say. And she actually plays an ancestor of the McFlys with an Irish accent and everything. Which I like the, you notice that that's a projector screen there, which that one also that you realize just how accurate that one turned out to be, because I know some people that they don't even have TVs, they just have HD projectors, which is pretty cool. Which this is a big exposition dump that kind of helps to set the stage for what will happen in part 3. And that's one thing that people tend not to like about middle chapters in films, is that sometimes they do kind of get bogged down in feeling like they're kind of in between like the big finale and the big beginning, which they technically are, and that's why something like Empire Strikes Back that's why it stands out so much, because it has a whole lot of drama in the middle there, and it isn't all just an exposition dump, which is not to say that this one is just that, but it does have its fair share of setting up the next one and trying to make this one connect to the previous one. But again, there's a lot of great stuff, in the midst of it all. 174, which I assume that they tried to estimate what the inflation rates were going to be. And I mean, if you drive in a taxi cab for a long enough distance, I'm sure the tab probably would end up to be that expensive. I don't know exactly, what they are currently, but yeah, so he says that this is a rough neighborhood. We might as well get to the fact that why isn't this Crispin Glover? It's because he had a pay dispute with the producers, and they hired a different actor, and they heavily made him up to try and cover up the fact that it wasn't him. And it turned out that Crispin Glover was able to actually, sue the producers, and that was apparently a big win for actors to have control over their likenesses. And so that's why, like, for example, with the Star Wars films, like, why those actors signed on for multiple sequels, and that was pretty important. And I assume that they probably renewed their contracts in perpetuity or whatever for the sake of their likeness rights and that kind of stuff, not just for the merchandising, but also for, like, when we had that recent episode of The Mandalorian with young Luke Skywalker returning, and you saw the young, facially reconstructed Mark Hamill. I assume that it's because he probably sold his likeness rights to do that, because otherwise you would run into a situation like this where they had to recast, but it was such that they were still using like old footage of Crispin Glover and different things like that. They weren't just a lot of behind the scenes stuff, but it is nonetheless important if you are it is nonetheless important if you are an actor, because your likeness is pretty important, obviously. And they had to do some legal grunt work as far as like securing Marlon Brando's likeness for Superman Returns, because they used a lot of footage that was shot of him when he was still alive, and they had to go through his estate and pay a pretty exorbitant amount to even use his likeness to put him in the film. And I'm talking over the fact that old Biff just stole the DeLorean to cause all sorts of trouble. Now, we do not have the hydration thing instead of the microwave. Now, I mean, obviously, astronauts have to, rehydrate food when they're up in space, but we don't have anything like this. And certainly not that spectacular or that quick, as much as I'm sure many of us would like it. Now, we did see the TV with multiple channels being able to be watched at the same time. That one most definitely did happen. Old Marty there with the two ties, that has thankfully not happened, and I do not want it to because that looks atrocious. Now, he does have a VR headset there, young Marty does. He has a VR headset, which is pretty sweet. They definitely predicted that. The makeup on older Marty there does not look like how Michael J. Fox looks now. He's actually aged better than that, which is really good. The video chat here, this actually, they didn't know how accurate that would be either. Not so much via TV or whatever, although you can certainly do that, but more so via like Skype or especially Zoom these days for professional calls. That has kind of become the norm because we're in pandemic times. And as we can see, the JITS is monitoring. And as we can see, old man Marty there is getting, bullied into, doing nefarious things, without, necessarily meaning to. And he still gets triggered by chicken and all that kind of stuff. So he still hasn't learned. Which, now it kind of makes you wonder if this event would have happened, which I don't think this event necessarily would have happened had they not made Griff go to jail instead. And if I recall, that's Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers, if I recall. So I don't even remember what all this is. Something at their company that is illegal, which they never really make all that clear, at least not to me. But obviously, it's the important thing is that they're McFly. I like this guy. I like that guy. It's just clear that he's doing something illegal and he gets fired for it. Terminated? No. And he tries to get out of it, but he can't. Now, one thing that faxes are still around. Read my fax, but you're fired. Ah, that's funny. The fax there, like, faxes are nowhere near as commonplace as they once were. They're still around. The technology still exists, but come on, nobody faxes anymore. But the technology definitely exists. I just think that they kind of overestimated how prominent faxes would be. I don't really see the internet as we think of it today being, used in here. And poor Marty tries to play his guitar, but his hand's still messing up from the accident, which sucks, because that could have been his great life. Yeah, he's playing poorly. Yeah, he's trying to cover it up from his mom or whatever, which kind of makes you wonder if this version of Marty, if he has been let go from jobs before or not. And older Jennifer, who, she actually looks pretty good for, however, 30 years older. And I'm old, I'm young. That's funny. Now, the fainting thing is what happened. The time paradox thing, that did not happen, thankfully. I mean, the universe could have been destroyed, but out of all the elements of this film, all the time travel elements, that's one thing that's not really all that fleshed out in here, but there's not a lot of room for it to be either. Now, you notice here, old Biff looks like he's dying, and he looks like he's having a heart attack, although I always theorize that because he changed aspects of the past, I always assumed that he was ceasing to be, that this version of him in this reality is coming apart. And so the version of him that exists here is ceasing to exist, and that's why he died. That's what I think. Although, and yeah, see, look at him. He looks like he's suffering. Like he's probably going to fade away from existence, just like Marty was threatening to in the first one. But time traveling is just too dangerous. Better that I devote myself to studying the other great mystery of the universe. Women. Which, again, we're setting up the third one with the Old West thing and with, women thing, because old Doc, he has devoted his life to science such that he just simply never found the right one. Certainly not in his time, but anyway, did we make it? Did we make it? Are we back? Well, sort of, but not. Oh, there you go. There's a plane, which they did, but not to the version of '85 that they remember. Now, I guess that that old man Biff, he must have gone like a few minutes ahead of when he left, uh, and so when he returned, I guess that his version of himself was. It must have taken a little bit for him and for his reality to fade away, and they must have just been able to, they must have just been able to get back to what they thought was '85 just in time before they, faded away, or who knows what. It's a little convoluted. But again, this was still pretty, yeah, the whole, like, convince her it was all a dream thing. I'm not sure I necessarily buy that. Like, some movies, they do that when, they don't really necessarily know how to write their way out of a problem. And I don't, if I went through all this shit, I don't think I would think it was all a dream. I think I might check into the insane asylum or something. Oh, yeah, and already we get some signs that things are different. We get even more, graffiti and awfulness on the Lion Estates there. Oh, and a lot of dogs just running around. Which, now, not to be overly political, but apparently Bob Gale has said that the inspiration for this version of Biff, the one who runs Hill Valley here, as kind of a, this is like a capitalistic nightmare. This is like capitalism gone berserk, where capitalism and, the public sector, public service, where they become one. Apparently Bob Gale has said that, he based this version of Biff on Donald Trump, which obviously, we all know that he just recently is now an ex-president, and all of the, controversy of his term and all that stuff. Which I don't know exactly. I mean, I don't think he's lying or anything, but I kind of wonder, like it seems kind of convenient to bring that up now, kind of in the wake of like how controversial Trump's presidency has been and that kind of stuff. It seems like one of those, like, just throw that on the fire, as opposed to like if that were really pressing, then he might have said that, prior to, the idea of Trump being in politics. Then again, the impetus for it might not have been as we ain't gonna be terrorized, yeah. The impetus for it might not have been as severe, because there wasn't really a blip on, the Trump in politics, prospect. That wasn't really a blip on the radar. Now, it's kind of sad to see, this is, as far as screenwriting, we're most definitely out of the first act. We are very much in the middle act, and in this middle act, we see a lot of darkness. We see homicides, we see a ghetto from what was once a, good neighborhood, and, we see this town just pretty much in ruins, and, that's, again, I bring up the whole Trump presidency thing because he brought up, like, American Carnage and, all that stuff, and there was so much in the way of social unrest and division and that kind of stuff. And now this is an alternate 1985, but still, you can't help but think of it, especially because the writer, brought it up himself, so we have to talk about it. I think, honestly, this whole middle act is probably my favorite part of the film, just because it's nice to see these characters that we've gotten to know. Can't be. A little bit of comic relief here, which is very wise, because of how, look at him, he's got an ammo belt. He's in a vest, like he is decked out, which, as we know, an ancestor of his was actually the sheriff or whatever in Hill Valley. Like a slacker. That's right. He's still the same guy, even in this version. Looking like Blofeld there with that scar on his head. But anyway, yeah, I like this good bit of comedy there, which, oh, and I like he's in a drive-by, which is kind of funny. Kind of reminds me of that Clint Eastwood film Gran Torino a little bit, where he's like the old man who has to confront the gangs and stuff. But anyway, yeah, I think this whole middle act, to me, I think that this is probably my favorite part of the film, because it has a lot of, it shows that there's a lot of darkness that can come about via time travel, and I just like seeing, a fun-loving franchise. I like seeing that, I like those characters being able to be confronted by a lot of just dark elements. It's like, a lot of people don't like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, but I really love the middle act of that because you see these characters that we've gotten to know they have to face the worst imaginable reality, and it's kind of their hell on earth. And in here we have a line in a little bit. We have Marty say the line, it's like we're in hell or something. He's like, no, Doc's like, no, this is Hill Valley, but I can't imagine hell being much worse. And we see a lot of hellishness. We see Hellhole there. We see, Hill Valley being called Hell Valley. And look at that. We see, bikers. We see toxic waste reclamation. We see, tanks being rolled out on the civilian streets, which is not unlike a lot of what we've seen in the last few years, unfortunately. I like the Biff Tannen Museum here. Again, laying the seeds for what will happen in part 3, and also catching us, the audience, up to speed on what all has happened since, Biff started to do his thing. I like the makeup job on this version of Biff also. He looks really sleazy and awful. Yep, there you go. Buford Mad Dog Tannen's laying the seeds for what would happen later. And it is very interesting to watch this whole thing in the wake of the last few years, and the depths of like what all we went through in the Trump presidency, and the degrees of trying to merge private businesses with the public sector, and all the corruption and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's pretty unreal. And again, this is an alternate 1985, so we're not trying to like predict what would happen in the future, but it really it's such that you can't help but make the comparison. I do like that they put him in with Marilyn Monroe there. That's a good touch, and that was pre Forrest Gump also. Which now it looks like with that whole the wedding scene there, I wonder if they were modeling that after Elvis's wedding because their outfits look kind of similar. And actually, I just realized that his gang, Biff's gang, they kind of look like the Memphis Mafia a little bit, the people that hung around Elvis. Which Elvis was nowhere near like like Biff is in this film, but that's an interesting comparison there. Now we're recreating the gag that we saw the fake out from part 1. But again, as you can, I don't know if it's because I'm watching this on the 4K restoration, but I can very clearly see that I could very clearly see that Lorraine is not the way that we left her. 27th floor. Like, I kind of wonder if they're even bothering to hide it at this point. I don't think they are. But again, I'm watching this on the 4K restoration, so whatever kind of shadows and stuff is were there, the brightness and everything is a little bit more enhanced, and they're so big. Yes, indeed she is. And she's most definitely kind of like a Las Vegas style floozy, and she's living in terror of her husband, which, this whole thing I think is really sad because you see just how, yeah, it's supposed to be in Switzerland. It's so sad to see just how much this place has gone to hell, and how the depths of Biff's monstrosity, like, especially, in other words, like, if he got his way, if he had power and everything, he could be just truly wicked and corrupt. And again, I imagine that is where Bob Gale's head was at. I kind of wonder, again, like, if he could have foreseen all of that, that level of bullying and, horribleness. I wonder if he could have foreseen all that with the Trump presidency, or if he was just saying that to try and, be part of a trend. I really don't know. I mean, it's very possible because, I mean, Trump wasn't exactly the, nicest guy, or the most, free from this kind of image, even all the way back in '89. But still, I kind of wonder just how much he could have even predicted. I do like the fact that these guys do look like the Memphis Mafia a little bit. But again, like, you see just the depths of his cruelty, and how you have to be aware of bullies, because if they ever do get power, then they could end up like this. And we've seen plenty of examples of that, not just with Trump, but with like Harvey Weinstein and that kind of stuff. You can have them. Which now keep in mind, I paused there because I was remembering the fact that I saw this movie for the first time on the Disney Channel, and there's a lot of little things that they cut out, and that was one of them, as well as like language and stuff. Which I was kind of surprised that they even showed this on the Disney Channel because A, it's not a Disney film, and B, it's got a lot of mature kind of dark elements to it. But that was also back in 2001. I don't think they would do that today. I don't think they would do that today, which, as we saw with the daughter Linda and with Dave, that they all ended up as failures as well. And Marty was supposed to be in a boarding school in Switzerland. He really hates Marty, as you can see. And again, Thomas F. Wilson, his acting in this segment of the film, I think this could be the best bit of acting that he does in the whole series, just because he gets to be truly menacing. And it's just, yeah, this whole middle act, it does make me very sad, but I'm saying that as a compliment because I really love when these kinds of movies, when they can get to that kind of darkness. I think it's important for audiences to be in that place at least for a little while, because if you don't have darkness in your story, then you just get light fluff and you don't have anything real underneath it. And I think that's really important. I'm always someone, like, in a comedy, I always look for the dramatic elements, and in a drama I tend to look for any hints of comic relief, because real life has both, and you have to sprinkle both in to where it feels real and feels believable. And again, in a generally fun-loving franchise, it's good to know that they don't forget about the fact that, there's a lot of darkness that has the potential to get realized in the story. Now, this whole sequence right here, I'm almost certain that they lifted this from It's a Wonderful Life, like almost certain, because, well, Spielberg, who was a executive producer on this thing, on the whole series, he often references Frank Capra, and again, this whole thing is right out of It's a Wonderful Life when George Bailey goes and sees the grave of his brother in that alternate timeline where he doesn't exist, where he never was born. And yeah, no, please. I love Michael J. Fox's performance in this part right here, because I feel like, again, talk about the pathos, the darkness. The actors really sell it. I love that he comes from the shadows there. Doc comes from the shadows. That's a very kind of, again, just like Clarence the ghost, the angel from It's a Wonderful Life. And yeah, see, what happened in March 15th, 1973. Which, again, this actually, the grave scene, and then this one right here where they're going through the public records. The library is boarded up, shut down, so he broke in and borrowed some newspapers, which, again, like, I think, to me, like, that is one of the scariest parts of this movie, the idea that public information is either no longer valued or is suppressed. That just tells you how messed up this reality really is. And again, when all that we've gone through these days with fake news and with, the battle for the truth and that kind of stuff, I mean, I don't even know if they predicted just how much of a struggle that would be. And here we get the alternate timeline. This is why it's my favorite scene, because this was really, I think, the first time that I had really thought about alternate timelines, and I suspect, obviously, most of the audience, this is the first time that they might have thought of it. And this is also the turning point. This is like this is our midpoint in the script, because this is where the action reverses, and we're able to, it's the apex of the rising action into the descending action, and this is when our heroes are able to regroup and come up with a new plan to solve their present, their present circumstances. And we have the exposition in here is actually pretty streamlined. Like, it's not quite as clunky as it was in the first part, and plus, like, the dramatic lightning strike with the top of Biff's cane there, that's a good touch. I really like the fact that it's a hand that's almost like fascistic when you think about it, because the raised fist is a fascistic symbol, and this is a very fascistic society. While we were in the future, he went and he took the time machine and brought it back to some point in the past. gave the book to himself at some point in the past. I don't know. Something about the lighting in here, something about the mood. It's about as close as this series ever gets to like a horror film. And I think that that's a really good touch. It lets you know that, this is serious. The weight is hanging in the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is hanging in the air, and that's something I think a lot of modern movies need to remember how to do. It's like you need to remind people just how much is at stake, and it's okay to let a scene breathe just a little bit, so that way you can, let the weight of the situation hang over our heroes' heads, like it does here. That yawning bit of realization that if he hadn't bought the book, none of this would have happened. It's a good line that Doc had there. It's all in the past. You mean the future? Whatever. That's great. Um, Back to the Future. Stop Biff from stealing the time machine. Can't. If we travel into the future from this point in time, it will be the future of this reality. Which that makes sense. I'm glad that they see that. That's a really good touch, because he's totally right that they would totally be. Oh wow, I forgot about this. Yeah, Emmett Brown gets committed, which obviously he did that as a deliberate. Biff did that as a deliberate attempt to make sure that that Doc and Marty couldn't come after him. And back to our reality. I'm amazed at how, like, even looking at the lighting, the shadows on this thing is really great. Like, it's got a lot of good, creepy, kind of low angle lighting there. I'm a big fan of that. And shadows on the face and all that stuff. It's just, oh, it's so great. I had to watch it just for a minute. Oh, yeah, we got a clip here from A Fistful of Dollars with the good old Clint Eastwood. Again, subtle setup for what will happen in part 3, which is a really good touch. I actually watched A Fistful of Dollars again not too long ago. It's a great film, and I'm really glad that Spielberg and Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis and all that stuff. I'm really glad that they paid homage to the legend that is Clint Eastwood by having Marty adopt that name. Oh yeah, by the way, saw this on a Disney Channel broadcast back in 2001, and we got some naked menage a trois action going on here. So oh, the times change. Which I love the look of determination that Michael J. Fox has on his face starting in the end of that previous scene and continuing all throughout this scene. I think, again, he really nails the character and the depths of he's had to do a whole lot more than he ever necessarily thought he'd have to, as far as going back in time and repairing timelines and having to not learn to not be a pushover and having to learn to be brave and dealing with loss in this alternate timeline that he obviously wasn't there to witness firsthand, but he learns about it secondhand. And then here he has to go up against the big bad guy at the height of his power, and it's like that's a really amazing thing, and he does it remarkably well. And again, we're tying it back into the first one by setting the stage for what will become the third act when they have to go back to 1955. I love the look of Biff's interior here, which actually, speaking of the Trump comparisons, I don't know when the newspaper and magazine coverage and stuff. I need to refresh my memory on the timeline of when Trump Tower was built and the interior and all that stuff, because I know that the living quarters of Trump Tower are decked out in gold and that kind of stuff, and the interior looks not too dissimilar from the pictures I've seen. It's gaudy, but it's not quite as tacky as this with the leopard skin and all that. It's more gold and marble and that kind of stuff. But I kind of wonder when the pictures and stuff were first debuted of what the inside looked like. I think it was readily available at the time. They might have used that as an inspiration. I don't know. And again, we get a little bit of the set stage for what will happen in the third act here. And again, he gets to be very intimidating in this scene, and up to and including cold-blooded murder, as we're gonna see, because he has his his gun loaded and all that. That's a good touch there. Marty takes the matchbox, which that will actually come in handy later. Um, Again, good example of planning and payoff. Not quite as extremely tight as the first one was, but again, that script was so unbelievably good that it's like, how could anything hope to replicate its tightness? But again, look at that. He's about to cold-blooded murder this kid. Which now what is that made of? Like that ashtray or whatever that is, the matchbox tray, that does not look very heavy, and yet it's stuck into the back of the chair. That always kind of puzzled me whenever I've seen that film. I was like, that should be a lot heavier in order for it to do that, but maybe it is heavier than I think. I really don't know. I like this whole chase scene down the stairs, and I like seeing Marty outwit them. Um, have you noticed that in a lot of movies these days, how like characters, they don't outwit characters as much as they should? Generally comes down to like, who's more powerful or who has, access to this thing or that thing. I like seeing characters being able to outwit other characters like that. That's a good touch there. The rooftop showdown's a good one too. That's a really good. Oh, again, he looks so menacing in that. Even in a robe, he looks menacing. Um, and I also like the look of the building there that got built on the grounds of the clock tower, and all of the smokestacks and all that stuff. I kind of wonder where they shot this, like this rooftop scene. I mean, again, this is almost okay. This came out in the same year as Tim Burton's Batman, and this whole exchange actually kind of reminds me of something that you might have seen in that film. And he even admits to having killed George McFly, which again, that just shows you what a monster Biff really is. Because we might not have gotten that sense from the version of him that we saw in the original 1985 and in 1955. We might have just thought he was just a generic jerk, but like, man, he's a real monster in here, up to and including multiple murders in a kind of capitalistic fascistic state. I love this. This looks almost like Aladdin right here, which obviously the Disney film didn't come out yet, but more like Aladdin, the fairy tale. Or the Arabian Night. That's just a great shot of him standing on the car and all that stuff. I don't know. That always reminded me of Aladdin. We gotta go back to 1955. I don't believe it. That was a good line. Now, interestingly enough, this film is actually the shortest out of all of them, if I recall. But that also means it does keep up at a pretty brisk, pace. It never drags, which is a really good thing. The first one didn't drag either, but this one, I think, is like maybe 10 minutes or so shorter, maybe a little bit more. And again, we have a very clear act division here where, they're going back in time. Oh, look at that. The time indicator or whatever is messing up. Oh, the time circuit's on. Back now. Again, we got a little bit of an exposition dump here. Yeah, assuming we succeed in our mission, the alternate 1985 would change back into the real 1985, instantaneously transforming around Jennifer and Einie. Which, again, I have to ask, is that really believable? Like, I don't know if I necessarily buy that. I mean, wouldn't they, I don't know, wouldn't they have been changed too? I don't know. Einstein, well, he's a dog, who cares? But, like, Jennifer, yeah, I'm not necessarily... I don't know. Would that work? You tell me. I'm kind of two minds about it. I could see that working or not working. You were yesterday. Here yesterday. That's funny. I just realized that. But yeah, I love the fact that they have to go back to 1955 because, and it's not like they're trying to recreate the magic of the first one. I really love the fact that you're able to see a lot of the same events but from different angles, and you're able to see scenes and other events that happened in that day that, shall we say, got left on the cutting room floor, or, just we didn't get to see it, I think that's just a good touch. Yeah, you gotta be careful. Don't want anyone else to, to risk stealing the other... Oh, yeah, sorry. Again, there's a lot of exposition dump here. That's right. There's two of Doc and there's two of Marty in this timeline, so they have to be careful. Now, the filmmakers, they're very wise they keep the exposition dumps there. They keep them physically moving there. Because, see, he's running around, Doc's running around, he's running in front of the camera, he's running away from it, all that stuff. So they do manage to keep it interesting. This is a really good touch, too, the fact that he has, yeah, that he has money in that something inconspicuous. And he, of course, he looks like a Blues Brother. Just realized that he looks like, oh, and he's got the lawn jockey there, which that's very period, unfortunately. But I love the fact that Biff lives with his grandma. I think that's funny because, again, we saw Biff at the height of his power, at the height of his monstrosity. And luckily, a little bit of comic relief, we see him being just so pathetic as a high school kid. And yet, he still has that cruelty side of him. It's just a lot more funny right here because the stakes are so much lower because you see him just throw the ball onto the roof. What an asshole. Look at that. Go get it. What a dick. I kind of wonder how many takes it took to get the ball to land exactly right because that was a good throw. But again, we hear the Mr. Sandman music, but again, we see it from a different angle, and we see him keeping an eye on what Biff was up to that day. And I love that. I'm a big fan of this as a storytelling device. Now, another thing that I have never understood about this film, maybe, some of you might understand it, when he says, nobody can start this car but me. How on earth would that be possible? I don't know. Does he need to, Jimmy the key just right? Does he need to... I don't know. I've never really understood that. Some car expert might be able to fill me in on how on earth that would be possible in a 46 Ford. And yeah, $300 damage to his car, which... Where did that go? Where did that damage go? Because he just... Yeah, I mean, he ran into the manure truck, but, he... I mean, it didn't seem like there was that much damage, but then again, they must have just fixed it or whatever, but... Who knows? Although $300 in 1955 money, that's a lot. I mean, that's still a lot of money, but it's quite a lot of money relative to inflation and all that stuff. I just realized he threw whatever those cans are, he threw them on Marty's crotch. And there's old Lorraine in her not poodle skirt, but giraffe skirt. That's pretty cool. I like the skirt she has on it, and I actually do like Biff's shirt there. That's pretty styling. But again, we see what his true intentions with Lorraine are, and we also see the impetus for why he would want to rape her at this time, because besides just being a bully and a horrible person, but he really does fancy her on some level, perhaps just as a as a trophy or whatever, but Straight door on a submarine, you dork. Still an idiot. Going with Calvin Klein, yeah. Which, again, I like seeing the other things that happened that day. That's a very kind of, I guess that's like something that you'd see on a TV show where Lost would do that all the time, where they'd show you different characters doing different things in the same location. But, yeah. It's you and me, Lorraine. Yeah, I have to say, in terms of themes and deeper meanings and stuff, this one's probably the most shallow out of the three. Partially, it's because they do so much jumping around in time that they don't really have a whole lot of time to stay in one place. That's partially also why I like the middle act a lot, because I feel like out of all the deeper themes that are in here, I think that that they're best expressed in that middle act, because again, that's where the pathos is really expressed. It's the whole fact that both Marty and Doc were being irresponsible, and this is what happens when you are irresponsible. That's funny. It's like, if you dent this car, I'll kill you. Which, old man Biff, he hasn't driven a non-flying car in a while, so I kind of wonder if that has to, if that's a bit of a learning curve again. Now here in this car, you notice that the windshield has that bar down the middle. So I do kind of wonder, in terms of filming, if that would make it easier to do the same actor, playing two different roles. I don't know, because again, this, as you can see, they're doing the same camera motion but with the same actor playing two different roles. So um, they're doing that. So for all I know, that might have helped. The kind of split screen aspect of it might have helped. That's how they did it in the old days prior to CGI. They did that with like Haley Mills in the original Parent Trap. They did a split screen effect, and they had to have like a clear line down the middle to make it possible. Oh, and you could see there when he threw the book, there was a little bit of, you could see kind of what was not green screen, but it was like that early blue screen composite there. You could see a little bit of that. So this whole thing I think is being shot on that early blue screen compositing. Um, but again, like it I have to say, out of all those, this one looks really darn good. And again, this was all very primitive CGI, but that was still a lot of the carryovers of the old composite shots. So you see the old blending with the new, and you see how, especially relative to other films from 1989, this one definitely stands out. Um, and again, you see, yep, bet on the winner and you'll never lose. Which, again, we kind of already know this. So it does kind of make you wonder, is this a little bit of padding, or is, I mean, I think it's pretty necessary just because of, like, as you can see, like, there was a chance for Marty to snatch the book there, but, yeah, and also it's just good to know that, it's good to know exactly what all he said to young Biff to get him to do this, and the keep it on you, physically on your person, that it sets that up too. Oh, and he tells him about the crazy wild-eyed old man thing. So yeah, it is still important, but again, generally speaking, you don't necessarily want to tell the audience the same thing over and over again. Um, but again, this film, there's a lot thrown at you, so maybe they did have to do a little bit more reiteration. Um, well, and it is just cool to see what all old Biff actually said to young Biff to get him to do all this. But again, generally with screenwriting, you want to not have to repeat information for them to. Now, what's the range on those? What's the range on those walkie-talkies? Because that's a remarkable range. Um, like, how many miles are they apart? Are they like? I mean, I think even cell reception, depending on how remote they are, cell reception might even have a hard time. Um, yeah, but those walkie talkies there, remarkable range. I wonder if those are from 2015. Who knows? The packaging made it look like they were from like the 80s or the 50s. I couldn't really tell. But yeah, remarkable range. But this also explains why Marty's not able to get the almanac sooner. Because he's stuck in the garage, which now I guess he could break out, but Doc probably told him not to. Um, and then here he goes. He's pulling out with his 46 Ford, which that's a beautiful car, I have to say. Oh, look at. Oh, okay, I remember. Yeah, he had to. Sorry, I'm having to read the subtitles and do this at the same time. But yeah, I remember he had to get his bicycle to get there, and he got there way too late. And he had to get his 50s clothes and all that stuff. He still has the tags on the hat and all that stuff. That's just funny. That's so like Doc, too. And there he is, driving in that beautiful car. And there's the tunnel there, which will play a key role in the climax of this film. Which you'd have to whisper really quietly in order for him to not hear you, for Biff to not hear you. Look at that hat. That's quite the hat. Oh yeah, and there he is. He finds himself right in the middle of the street square there, where he sees his older self setting up the telephone, or the wiring there to let the time machine get the 1.21 gigawatts. And this is more just like a cutesy meeting here, rather than necessarily like a serious moment or whatever. Must have just missed him. He's in the back of Biff's car. He got to speak really softly in order to not be heard by Biff. Yeah, he's gonna grab it as soon as we get to the school. Yeah, not to run into your other self as soon as 1955 Doc's right behind him, which Now again, talk about deeper themes. I do think that's sort of a continuation of what we saw with the whole fact that the mistakes that Marty makes can impact Doc as well. Yeah, this is just a funny scene here. And I do kind of wonder if it's another attempt to kind of show off this technology that they have now, the Visiglide or whatever. Because again, this was pretty unprecedented back in 1989. Which he doesn't sound any different. Doc doesn't sound any different than he does in 1955. Well, and you can also see that 1955 Doc's a little puzzled too, so maybe he knows that something's up. I don't know. That always kind of puzzled me too. Like, why doesn't he recognize himself? But I mean, it is Doc. He is kind of absent-minded. He's the absent-minded professor, of course. Not Disney's version, but his own version. That's a cute line. We're gonna bump into each other sometime again in the future or in the past, and he's all like freaked out. It's a good bit of interaction there, and good attention to detail with their hair too, because his hair in 1955 looks exactly like it did before. Um, again, I talked about the not 100% recreation of the McFly house in the very beginning, but I think the way that they make Doc look in 1955, they make him look very much like he did, so that's a good touch. And here we are, we're at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, but we're coming at it from another angle. He's coming in the back way, and we get to see what all Biff was up to. Love that song. And yep, okay, so here's a little bit of controversy again with Crispin Glover there, because that's all footage that we saw from part one used again, and they use that other actor, and they don't put a lot of emphasis on his face and stuff for some of those other angles that we didn't get to see, which again, that's the controversy with Crispin Glover there. Which again, this could totally be accused of trying to recreate the magic, but I don't think so, because I think so we got them, they're spiking the punch, got Ooh La La, or one of our little, I don't know, was that a real porno mag? I don't know. It doesn't even look like a porno mag. It looks more like you could even call it like text erotica, or even like a phony like Playboy or something, because Playboy was, and I think still is, largely, well, the written word, which obviously then you have the centerfolds and all that stuff, but like, especially when Playboy first debuted, they were primarily known, well, it sounds like an excuse, but no, they were primarily known for like their articles and their editorials and short stories and that kind of stuff. They just so happen to have the centerfolds and that kind of stuff, so it looks like that Ooh La La thing, it looks like they're taking after that, which again, I don't even know if that was a real book or not. I don't think it was, but correct me if I'm wrong. And there he goes, he's chilling out. Well, no, he's reading Ooh La La, but then he switched out he switches out the sports almanac, the dust jacket there, which let's see if I can remember why exactly he does that, because again, that was surprisingly smart of him to do for protection's sake, but let me see if I can remember exactly why he does that. And there he goes, he sees the old version, he sees the other version of himself. I do like the black leather jacket and hat look for Marty. I think he looks pretty snazzy. But again, he looks like a Blues Brother. And the Blues Brothers, obviously, another big 80s franchise. So, I kind of wonder, well, he does look like a hood, from that period also, which I suspect that the Blues Brothers are kind of meant to look like that too. Good old Mr. Strickland, he never gets old. He's trying to be like Eddie Haskell there. He's trying to be all like, oh, I don't know, sir. Sports statistics, interesting subject. Homework, Tannen? Yeah, it ain't homework because I ain't home. I thought that was a legitimately funny line. Like, if he, like, that was, like, the closest I think that Biff has ever gotten to being kind of clever. Which actually, okay, so we know that he switched the dust jackets, and we know that that's really Ooh La La. So I wonder if Strickland confiscated it because he was looking for a little whacking material. I mean, in the repressed 50s, I wouldn't be surprised. And again, we get some new dialogue here. I'd like to have that in writing. Yeah, me too. Yeah, we get to see some new dialogue there that we didn't get to see between Marty and his future mother. Which, again, if you're going to cover the same kind of thing from a different angle, then it's always good to include SS Strickland discipline. Because, again, that's a little bit of subtle. Oh, look at that! Look at Mr. Strickland. He's spiking his own drink and he's settling down for some. I bet he's gonna rub one out. That's what he probably would do if he wasn't busy spying on the kids. He's a pervert, isn't he? He's a sick old man. Um, but anyway, yeah, it's always good to include new things for your audience members to absorb if you're gonna show the same scene from another angle. But yeah, that whole discipline thing, that sets up a little bit of what the ancestor of Mr. Strickland, what he'll be like. Uh-oh, the door. Yeah, I think he's just a sick old man. He was gonna rub one out with his liquor there in his office, watching them kids dancing and having a good time. That's just the kind of repressed, sick fuck that he is. Although I love Mr. Strickland and you do too. Good hijinks here. Um, yeah, there's some of the criticisms of this film was that there was a little too much running around, a little too much, hijinks and that kind of stuff, which I could see. I mean, I'm not having as much to talk about on like the thematic level or anything now. Again, technologically, this film is light years ahead of the first one and light years ahead of other films of its time. And we mostly see that in the future sequences. But a little bit in these other ones too. It does feel like three mini movies in one, just because of the three timelines that we visit. Oh, but look at that! He throws it away. I guess he got self-conscious. See, that's what happens. He couldn't focus. He couldn't get in the right headspace to rub one out. There you go. Ooh la la. Night number 29. Someone in the comments tell me if that was a real magazine. I don't think it was, but I could be wrong. And I say in the comments because I'm thinking YouTube specifically, not so much for the podcast part. And oh, here he goes. There's George McFly. He's gonna, do his thing, but we're seeing it through the window. Which, yeah, that was actually a surprisingly smart thing for Biff to do. I assume he did it because of, thinking about, like, if it were to get in the wrong hands or whatever. That is something that is, like, it's abnormally intelligent relative to what we know Biff to do. But then again, we didn't really expect Biff to become a, homicidal, fascistic maniac in his version of 85. Which, now, I do really love that Marty gets to see his old man deck Biff. He actually gets to see it because remember the other Biff or the other him never got. He only got to see the tail end of it, as we see here. Yeah, he only got to see the tail end. He didn't actually see a good angle from it, so that's nice that he got to see the full thing. I like that. That would be pretty wild to see yourself. That would, yeah, no wonder. Talk about deja vu. Yeah, you would be seeing. I can't even imagine how your brain would process that. You'd be seeing yourself. That's quite literally an out-of-body experience. Again, we got some old footage there split in with some new footage right there. And see, the storyline of part one still going on. He still has to get his parents together. So that adds some extra tension to this whole thing because the plot of part one could be screwed up. With this version of Marty kind of screwing things up. I love that. What's CPR? That's a good line. He's fine. Did you just take his wallet? He just took that guy's wallet. That's funny. Which I really love the fact that the events of part one could be screwed up still. Yeah, on the roof, 10-4, and then uh-oh. Mr. 3D Glasses leading the pack there, which now in the alternate 1985 you saw that he had those massive shades, which was pretty cool. Still love the 3D glasses there. I think that's that's a great fashion touch. Why can't that come back? And then, the time circuits are messing up. Oh, and they got the little flag things there. This is very exciting on the spectacle level. It's just, again, it's more convoluted. It's more up. There you go. Yep. See, he played the song. He got, George got to push the other guy down. They got to fall in love, and so Marty's existence is secured. Except, of course, as we find out that while he's playing Johnny Be Good, there's still a chance for things to go awry. Now, that actually does kind of address something I talked about in part one, which was that whole sequence, as funny and kind of rewarding as it is for how nerve-wracking the rest of it was, it's like it's a little reward for us having resolved that key plot point. But what's great is that it actually adds a tremendous amount of tension for this movie because there's still a lot of room for things to go awry. So if anything, that whole sequence in part one helps this movie quite a bit because it helps it have a more exciting climax. They're gonna jump me, then get out of there. One of my favorite lines. Now again, kind of an exposition dump here. A lot of talking, a lot of explaining. Yeah, have to reiterate what a paradox is, which again, we don't generally you don't want to do this with your dialogue. But again, these are kind of abstract concepts that are being foisted on an audience that at that time is not necessarily ready for it. So, Calvin Klein, the guy with the hat. That's so funny. I think he took your wallet. I think he took his wallet. I love that guy. That guy's my hero. But yeah, generally speaking, you do not want to reiterate the same information, but I can give it a little bit of a pass. You would never do that today, and I think audiences, because of home video and streaming and being able to rewind and that kind of stuff, I think that people would call you out on that today. But again, this really helps to add some more tension to this film. The fact that there was that whole Johnny Be Good sequence that could still go awry. Oh yeah, you see a little bit of the blue screen compositing there, as you can see when he walked in front of himself. You could see a little bit of the outline there. So there is some of the age is showing there, but it's nowhere near as bad as like other films that have shown their age from around this period. Relative to its time, those effects have held up remarkably well. It's really cool that he's up there in the rafters there. That looks very another outline of young Marty, other Marty, I should say. They're both young. Other Marty, non leather suit Marty. You see there, he's clearly in front of a blue screen there. That particular outline didn't really look as good as the other one did. But again, they got that new technology. They're wanting to show it off clearly. I do like that Marty, when he was in the audience there for a minute, he kind of looked at himself. He was like, "Oh, I'm doing pretty good." And that was funny. Now we have a little bit of old footage spliced in with new angles and that kind of stuff. Mostly it comes across as pretty seamless. It is interesting because Michael J. Fox did noticeably, his face did change a little bit because again it was 4 years prior. Not as drastically as other people. Like if you've watched A New Hope and then you watch Empire Strikes Back, Mark Hamill's face noticeably changes, and that's because he got in a car accident, and that's partially why his face changes. So it's not as noticeable as that, but it's just interesting to point out. And then again, that ending of that moment right there when he goes out the door leads into Marty showing up and saying, "Lorraine, Marty, that was very interesting music," which that's a recreated scene there a little bit. Here's another thing that I kind of wondered. So like we saw other Marty with the gray suit. He saw Biff's goons buried under the sandbags. I've often wondered, so does black suited Marty, does he remember that moment now? Because, the version of him that's going through all of that, he saw that. So does that now become black-suited Marty's memories? I would think so, but again, they never really explain that. And here we go with the chicken thing again, which this is like the third time that they've done that. And they at least do a variation of it in part three with the "Are you yellow?" which was a more common way of saying that same thing back in the Old West, I assume. Chicken. Bam! Ow! He got decked in the face there. Poor Marty. But yeah, there's a little bit of repetition there. And up there he goes. You steal my stuff. Bam. This one's for my car. Bam. I really love the showdown between the two of them. I think it's there's some cool stunts there because remember he still has the hoverboard from the future, which is pretty sweet. And you also notice here's another little thing I noticed. So he still has the hoverboard, but once they solve the problem with the sports almanac, the hoverboard does not disappear in the same way that, like, say, other aspects about the future, once they've changed something, then they disappear. The hoverboard does not disappear, nor does the "you're fired" facts disappear, which that's more of a plot point in part three. But those two things do not disappear, so I assume that those two things still happen, which is interesting. Well, I guess because it restores the timeline back to what we saw it, so that makes sense. But, like, for example, like when in part three, when they do all their running around in there, I think the hoverboard's still in place. Like it doesn't disappear, but the "you're fired" thing does. We'll have to watch for that once we get to it. Now, as you can see here, clearly the flying DeLorean there, that is clearly suspended from like a trailer or something, which, let's see, yeah, you can't really see it, but that's clearly what it's doing, because that it looks, yeah, just the way it looks like it's, the way that it looks when it's flying, and, that's some early green screen compositing, or early CGI compositing there, and then other times you can see that it's suspended from a trailer. Like when old Biff returns to the future from the past, you could see that it was on a trailer there because it kind of lurches as it lands. We went by a line. Sorry, we went by a line that always stood out to me when I was a kid, which was where he's like, "Let's land on him. We'll cripple his car." Marty is in a 46 Ford. We're in a DeLorean. He ripped through us like we were tinfoil. Which is true because cars in the old days, in the 40s and stuff, they were, I guess, comparatively speaking, they were much heavier than cars that, like, as cars went along, they became lighter weight because they got, they were built out of lighter materials. Obviously, like now that, and that's, relatively speaking, of course, if you took like a Humvee or a SUV, like a Ford Excursion or something, you plopped it on that thing, it wouldn't exactly, do wonders to it. But I really love this whole sequence here because, they're fighting over a book, and, he's doing a lot of really cool stuff with the hoverboard there, which that sure comes in handy because he's able to, magnetize or repel off of things that a wheel wouldn't be able to do. And so there's some good stunts here, too. Oh, we see some deviancy there from Biff, or like the malice on his face that we will see fully realized in alternate 1985. Yeah, just a good, solid action scene here to close off this middle chapter. Obviously, it can't compare to the climaxes of part one or even part three, but I think relative to the kind of story that this is telling, I think it's pretty solid. And it also pays into the whole skitching thing that we saw Marty take part in the first one. So again, there's some cross-film planting and payoff there. Now again, we see Biff being a lot more overtly like homicidal in terms of like he's perfectly okay with ramming Marty into cars and into walls and that kind of stuff. So some of that monstrosity gets to oh, I love that. That's such a cool stunt. He repels off the wall and he grabs the thing. We see that monstrosity in him come out, which, oh man, I love this. This is like classic. Some people have called it jousting, where one person where it's like two characters are going to collide at each other, except this is a little different because you got one person who's running away, albeit at a slower pace, and then, it's like Biff is toying with him. He's going to try to give him a little head start before he runs him over. And Biff is also not freaked out that he's flying around, or he's skating around on something that has no wheels. That always kind of stuck out to me. Why wouldn't... I mean, I don't know. He's probably focused on other things, but still, it's like, there's no wheels on that skateboard. And again, that malice that's on his face is really, really strong. And Marty, does he hook his... oh, I love that. That's a good touch that they had the flag thing there. Yeah, I guess he did hook his foot onto the little strap there, which probably the best ending line for Biff in this movie is manure. I hate manure. That's such a great running gag in the series that Biff and all the various and his ancestors and all that stuff, they all have unpleasant encounters with manure. I hate manure. Now, I remember the Disney Channel cut of this film. It was The Dark. I hate the dark, which I thought was so stupid. But again, that's why I refuse to watch movies on like cable television, like where there's commercials and stuff, because they will inevitably fuck it up with, having to cut out scenes and language and that kind of stuff. Yeah, he tries to land, but the storm is... Yeah. From the south, which, yeah, that's some exposition there. Like, you could tell that they were having to try to write their way out of potential plot holes and stuff by having characters say things like that are a little bit clunky, and I'm saying clunky relative to how smoothly the first one flowed. So I'm not saying that like clunky as like a true criticism. I'm just saying comparatively speaking. But good for them that they're thinking about potential plot holes and that kind of stuff. And I think for the most part they succeed with addressing what people could potentially... there you go. The matchbox is changing. Auto detailing, yep. I think for the most part they do a good job of... George McFly honored. There you go. So they fixed it. I think they do a good job of addressing potential plot holes, but again, there are just a few little things that I pointed out that always kind of stuck... Father's alive. That always stuck out to me. Emmett Brown, instead of committed, it's Emmett Brown commended. That's a good touch there. But... Which, yeah, see, they have to... It's the ripple effect. See, they had to... The future... lightning. Which I really love this whole ending here, because again, much like Empire Strikes Back, things do not necessarily end happily. Yeah, almost bought the farm. Be careful, you don't want to get struck by lightning. And bam. I absolutely love this whole ending here. I think it's just amazing, because just like Empire Strikes Back, it does not end happily. It ends on a remarkable cliffhanger, but it's like, once he gets struck by lightning, you're like, where did he go? Because he could have just been obliterated in that whole thing. Like, he, go back to the past or future or whatever, he could have just been killed, let alone... Now, obviously, we know that the time machine, needs the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity, and that can come through a bolt of lightning, so that's a good touch. But, yeah, for all we know, he could have just been fried. He could have been killed. But that's such a great place to leave off on, because, again, that was the souped-up version of the DeLorean that could go back and forth in time pretty easily. It could fly. It could do this and that. And so he's stuck in the past, and the best that they get... Oh, here you go. Yeah, because remember, the time machine went back to the time machine in this timeline went back to the future, so he's pretty much stuck. Now this, actually, besides the alternate timeline sequence, this is such a good scene because it comes out of absolute nowhere. And you're like, how in the hell does this guy know who Marty is? And I love that it's raining, it's creepy, it's very film noir. This guy, like, this is like a Twilight Zone ending right here. I really love it. Is your name Marty McFly? Yeah, you're like, how in the hell does this guy know who Marty is? And oh, I just love it. It's quite literally dripping with atmosphere. Um, and again, this totally sets the stage for part three. That's impossible. And he says that, Western Union, us in the office, we're hoping you could shed some light on the subject. We've had that envelope in our possession for the past 70 years. Now, can you imagine what's going through this guy's head? Like, he's like, who in the hell is this Marty McFly guy? Now, you have to wonder, like, okay, so he'd made the delivery, yep, and entering the name of Marty at this exact location, at this exact minute, November 12th, 1955, and it's on the faded paper from 1885. Mm-hmm. That's great. Which I really, you do wonder with this guy, you really do wonder what on earth is he thinking? Because he's like, who in the hell are you? Like, that's what I'd be thinking. I'd be like, okay, who are you? How did this guy know you were going to be here? Like, I mean, because that's about as clear a evidence as for time travel as you could get, minus being in the DeLorean yourself. And plus, the letter, says explicitly that, the DeLorean struck by lightning, and this guy's reading it, and he's like, what the fuck? I really wonder, whatever happened to that guy? He's seriously got to have some questions. And again, this totally sets up the sequel that they were shooting back to back. Yeah, what is this all about? That's what he's wondering. The dog's alive. He's in the Old West, but he's alive. Love it. Need any help? There's only one man who can help me. And of course, we get some more footage from part one. But yeah, seriously, I've always wondered about that guy. I'm like, what in the hell was he, I don't know, what was going through his head? Like, how did he rationalize that to himself? Because if he didn't believe in time travel, the possibility of it before, then you sure do now. Although then again, the 50s was the age of science fiction, so I mean, they probably believed that, Martians were coming and that kind of stuff, so who the hell knows. Yeah, again, they blend the old footage in with the newly shot footage, and they do it pretty well. This is one of the better recreated sequences here. Again, this is still old footage, but when it cuts into the next shot, it's not too shabby. And again, you do still get reminded of just how good that whole sequence was in part one. Yeah, see, that's not too bad. Now that the flames are going in a different direction, it's slightly different, obviously, but yeah, not too shabby as far as recreation. And dun dun dun, Marty comes running, which I love his reaction because he was the last person that he expected to see. Marty, no, it can't be. I just sent you back to the future. Now, I know you did send me back to the future, but I'm back from the future. And the best way to end this movie, great Scott. And he faints. Love it. Now, the interesting thing, so they were shooting part three during this one also, and they were able to cut together enough footage to give people a little taste of what was to come. Which is interesting because it's like you get a mini trailer for the next one within this film, which I've never quite seen that happen. That's a neat touch. I mean, it definitely helps encourage you to see how the story ends. And plus the fact that it's in 1885, it's like this is such a departure from what we saw in the last two. Now, things do, luckily, I think, get back to basics with the third one because, they're able to restrict what all the DeLorean can and can't do. They're able to, although they do kind of spoil it there, I just realized when they saw him with Jennifer there. So that's kind of dumb. But, again, we get to see a lot of cool stuff. So, again, it's like a trailer within the credits of the movie you're currently watching, coming summer 1990, which, interesting touch, although I do kind of wonder how wise that is. Well, again, because you saw, like, he clearly comes back to 1985. You can see that because he interacts with Jennifer, so that's kind of dumb, but whatever. Okay, so as far as sequels go, you notice I didn't really talk a whole lot about deeper themes or structure or whatever in the same way I did in the first one. That's largely because this one, as good of a middle chapter as I think it is, like, there's a lot of great spectacle, there's a lot of great speculating about what the future would be like, which the future is now the past, hard to believe. But I really think the meat and potatoes of this movie is in that middle act, which is by far the lowest point of the whole series in terms of, like, pathos and that kind of stuff. And you see what happens when that kind of irresponsibility with the timeline and with power, what that gets you, because you can create a monster that you didn't necessarily intend. I think in terms of just, time traveling hijinks and stuff, this one definitely has a lot of fun moments, and it has a lot of, it never drags, it's never boring, and again, it's the shortest of the three, if I recall. But it definitely, I don't think it's nearly as tight as the first one, but again, what could possibly be? Very little. That's such a tight script. It's so self-contained, all except for the ending, which sequel baits. But I don't know. I think for what it is, I think it's really fun. It's really got some good stuff in there. Certainly the visual effects are a noticeable jump from the first to the second. But again, I can see why it wasn't necessarily regarded as fondly at the time, but I can also see why it's got the cult following, or actually beyond cult following, it's got a lot of appeal now that it didn't necessarily once have. And I think especially because we all kind of wondered what 2015 would be like, and so we got to see what exactly happened. Quite a lot of stuff did indeed come true, more so than I think they necessarily even realized, but, I don't know, it's just fun. It's nowhere near as tight or as deep as the first one, but I think as far as middle chapters, it's very solid, and it helps to set the stage for what's a good conclusion. And thankfully, the part 3, it kind of does the opposite of this one, in the sense that, like, this one we visit like 3 different timelines, time periods. This one, the part 3, we visit only one, which is 1885. And then, it's in the Old West. It's so unbelievably different from what else we saw. We don't see the same stuff again, so it's all different, all new. And, and I know some people with part 3, they, weren't all that, they didn't dig on it very much, because they were like, oh, well, it's so different. The timeline is so far removed from the other ones, because the part 2 ties into part 1 so heavily. And I could see what they meant, but I don't know. I liked what I got. So anyway, that up Video Game Boys, Elijah Wood there. So yeah, and I like that they break down the cast here by year. That's a good touch. But anyway, so that was part 2. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to this commentary track. I am going to do part 3 just to wrap this up. George McFly in footage from Back to the Future. There's Crispin Glover. There's a credit there for the archive footage. Anyway, so I'm going to do part 3. I'm going to do that commentary track, and then what do you guys want to see for the next one, for the next commentary episode? I'm going to try to look through my collection. I'm going to see what other aspects of filmmaking I want to highlight. I'm going to try to mix up the genres too. We're going to do like horror and dramas and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, I just wanted to help, wrap this up, this storyline. But anyway, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.